Have you gotten any backlash or anything so far?
Well, you always have those trolls on Facebook or Instagram.
The
Yeah,
trolls are one
someone
thing,
today.
right?
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
like the government organizations, like
Um,
or even the big kind of companies behind this.
I
Has there
think
been
we've kind
anything
of
so?
laid low, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know that we were on anybody's radar to begin with. We haven't really experienced a ton of pushback that I
Yeah.
can say we've posted a couple of videos where we've had some alarmingly similar comments where I'm like, is that a bot? Like these are kind of weird.
Well, we've had a little bit of we've had some people like on IMDb like
Oh
some
yeah, that's a
negative
great one.
reviews and stuff. Like there's no like we have a whole bunch of one reviews on there, but no like
They don't
ratings,
say
but no
anything.
actually reviews.
But then on Amazon, we've had how many like
Over 400.
400 like 5-star reviews, and so it was weird to there have been moments where it's felt like somebody's trying to slow us down, but
And
we kind of feel
luckily,
like it's God's story to tell.
luckily because we didn't start off with a big following and we're not
We didn't start
influencers.
off with a following at all.
Yeah, like we're so
Yeah.
luckily we've kind of floated under the radar up until our film came out. We have noticed that like any interview that goes on the news or something, there's typically they reach out to like the I can't remember the exact acronym, but like the manufacturers of
Yep.
colors or whatever, and of course they're always stating that these chemicals are safe. The FDA says they're safe, and I mean the FDA said Red 3 was safe for 34 years and they just banned it. So like you can't really
Yeah.
trust that information. But then what's crazy is when you go like on the Association of Color Manufacturers, whatever their website, their partners are like PepsiCo and Coca-Cola and Hershey. Like it's it's and like so these companies who have they're the people using more synthetic dyes than anybody else. These are the people that fund this organization. So
I do know there's been a lot of pushback in regards to like policy. Like we interviewed a senator in California, and he said once he introduced a bill that was a failed bill to put a warning label on synthetic dyes, that everybody was coming into his office trying to get him to take it down. And so there's a lot of industry pressure there. So I think that's really where we're going to see some pushback. But I think that they're scared. Like they're scared of this army of parents and especially moms that we're this is an issue for us and we're addressing it. And to your point in regards to other countries, I was asking Dr. Jim Stevenson, and so he's the researcher that was responsible for the research and the reason why the EU as a whole decided to put a warning label on synthetic dyes. And what that did is it encouraged manufacturers to not use them because no one wants a warning label. The warning label says may have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children. So they opted out of using that and use, more natural additives. Or like beetroot and turmeric and things like
Yeah.
that. But I asked him, I said, who funded your study? Because every researcher we've talked to, we're like, why hasn't there been a study like they did in the EU and the way that they did it with the school system and this group of kids and on such a large scale? And they're like, I don't know, there's no funding. I keep applying for funding. I can't find
Mhm.
funding. And so I asked him, I was like, were you able to receive this funds? And he was like, oh, well, it was a government funded study. It
Mhm.
cost over $1 million to do this study. And I'm like, oh, wow. The government, they have a reason to protect their citizens
Sure.
because they hold some responsibility with healthcare. And so I think there's pros and cons with the way we do things here in the US, but the reality is they don't have the motivation to keep us healthy like other countries do. And so I think that that's an issue.
They don't have the motivation, but obviously there is information out there showing the negative sides, the potential, let's say, even if you said
Oh, definitely.
possibly,
No,
right?
100%. 27, we know enough. I say all that to say we know enough now that we have the WEHA report. And the WEHA report actually came out of California, and it's the most comprehensive study in the world. And so it took
meta-analysis.
into account 27 clinical trials just looking at children and the behavioral impacts it has on children. It's a very, very strong double blind placebo study. Like it's evidence and it's showing a causal relationship with these things. And so it concluded that it causes in some children synthetic dyes can cause hyperactivity, inattentiveness, restlessness, sleeplessness, irritability, and aggression. And so there are other studies that show even more issues with like memory and things like that, and like obviously anecdotal things that parents have noticed. But that research also, the WeHaul report even looked into like low income families and how they are more susceptible to consuming more synthetic dyes and have less access to healthy foods. And so like that's also an issue. And then that you go down the entire rabbit hole of, children in Title I schools. We don't have labels on their school foods, and children should not have to police their foods, but yet we're allowing schools to have foods that have synthetic dyes, which we know can harm children in general in terms of the genotoxicity, and some of them can cause, have been known to cause like cancer in animals. But in regards to, the neurobehavioral effects, we know that that's causing issues with some children, and we really need to be protecting, especially the most vulnerable populations, which is interesting enough. A news report just came out. They interviewed our family, and then he has what college does he work at? In North Carolina? South Carolina? But anyway, he's looking at Rep 40, and he's looking at if it can cause cancer. And the way that he did the study is he was looking at pregnant mice, and unfortunately, the mice died, so he couldn't study them. The babies died. So we're like, holy cow, which, I mean, of course it hasn't been replicated. It hasn't been published, but it's just like, there's so much pause for concern here. And the fact that it's in medications, it was in my prenatals that I took with my son. I went back and forth between the super fancy Garden of Life prenatals and the one that my gynecologist gave me whenever I would run out. And so it was brightly red. And so there's obviously a multitude of issues with that, and it really doesn't need to be in school food. It really doesn't need to be a medication, and that just shouldn't be something that we should have to police or even look for.